My name is Varela Soren. I am 32 years old. And if there is one thing I learned while growing up, it is this. In my family, I was never the favorite. My older sister, Maricel, was treated like she was perfect. She was like a princess in a story, and everyone around her seemed to bow down to her wishes. They paid her rent when she needed it, helped her with debts she made, and even gave her a whole house as if life had given her a secret magic key. Meanwhile, everything I tried to do felt like it barely mattered. For many years I stayed quiet. I worked hard. I struggled. I built everything on my own without asking anyone for help. And still, no matter what I did, it never seemed to matter to my parents. They always defended Maricel, rescued her from her mistakes, and supported her in ways that felt impossible for me to reach. I was just the daughter who was expected to be fine on her own. But last Christmas, something happened that I never wanted to believe. I realized my parents didn't just like Maricel more. They actually expected me to give everything I had to her. At that dinner, all it took was one simple question. One harmless-sounding question, and suddenly the whole family stopped talking. Maricel looked at me like I had done something terrible. My mother's face twisted as if I had committed a crime. And when the truth slipped out, when they finally realized what I had built on my own, all of our carefully hidden feelings exploded. My sister dropped to the floor crying and shouting, demanding that I give her $15 million immediately. My mother screamed at me in front of everyone, insisting that I owed Maricel a part of my success, as if every achievement I worked hard for somehow belonged to them. If you want to know how one sentence at a family dinner became the moment I finally cut ties with my family forever, stay with me. This story is unbelievable, and it shows a lot about what it's like to grow up in a family where love isn't equal. Long before I became an adult, I started noticing something strange about our home. It wasn't talked about and no one ever explained it, but it was there in every little thing we did. My sister, Maricel, was always at the center of attention, and I was allowed only to move around her orbit. And everyone in the family seemed perfectly comfortable with this arrangement. My parents, Theron and Eloan Soren, never said they had a favorite. They didn't need to. The way things happened spoke for itself. If Maricel wanted something, it appeared. If she needed new uniforms for cheer practice, they were always there. If she wanted to switch teams because she got bored, my mom would make the calls and make it happen. If a school project seemed too hard, my dad would step in and practically do it for her. Meanwhile, I learned early that anything I wanted had to be explained, earned, or justified. I wasn't encouraged to explore hobbies or try new things the way Maricel was. I was expected to manage, a word my mother repeated so often it felt like it was part of my personality. Whenever something went wrong for Maricel, it was treated like a household emergency. Whenever something went wrong for me, it was presented as a lesson to learn. It didn't matter whether Maricel actually deserved all that attention or help. She simply occupied the role of the favorite so completely that no one questioned it. I noticed the difference in 100 little ways. Things that didn't seem important one by one, but added up to something very clear when looked at together. If I brought home a good grade, it was met with a polite nod. If Maricel brought home an average grade, they threw a special dinner to celebrate. If I tried a new hobby, it was, let's see if it lasts. If she tried a new hobby, it was, what can we do to help you succeed? Even as kids, we understood the rules. She was always given the final slice of cake, the front seat in the car on road trips, the first apology if there was a fight. Even if she started an argument, I became the quiet problem solver, the one who stayed out of the way. I stopped asking for much because it was easier than being told my needs weren't important or my timing was inconvenient. Silence hurts less than disappointment. Strangely, I don't remember feeling angry at Maricel at first. I just watched her move through childhood with confidence because she was constantly praised and helped. I remember wondering what it would feel like to live in a home where you didn't have to justify your existence every day. I wasn't jealous of her things or advantages. I was jealous of her certainty. She walked through our house like the walls themselves leaned toward her. I learned to move quietly, carefully, and without drawing attention. Our Aunt Isolde Thane was the only person who ever noticed this. She would look at me for a little longer than normal, as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure she should. She never interfered or tried to change anything, but her eyes made me feel less alone. Sometimes, a single look from her reminded me that I wasn't imagining it. As we grew older, the difference between Maricel and me became even more normal to everyone else. My parents didn't seem to think they were making choices. They acted like they were following some invisible rule, like gravity pulled everything toward Maricel. And every time I adapted, every time I swallowed my own needs or hopes, the imbalance became even stronger. By the time we became adults, the roles in our family were set. Changing them would have been like rewriting the entire story of our family. Growing up this way didn't make me angry. It made me independent. But under that independence, something else quietly formed. I learned that if I ever wanted anything meaningful in life, I had to build it myself. No one was going to rescue me. No one was going to cheer for me. No one was going to stop me from falling. I learned to carry my own weight long before I knew how heavy it really was. Adulthood arrived quietly without ceremony. And when it did, the distance between me and the rest of my family grew bigger in a way none of them seemed to notice. I moved out as soon as I could. My first apartment was small, with thin walls and cheap carpet, but it felt like the first place that truly belonged to me. There was no audience, no quiet expectation that I should step aside for someone else. For the first time, I could hear my own thoughts without adjusting them to fit into the household hierarchy. College wasn't a dramatic change. It was a series of long work shifts, late nights, and determined focus. I started at a community college because that was all I could afford. Then I saved enough money to transfer to a state university. Every dollar mattered. Every hour counted. I kept a color-coded schedule taped above my desk, marking classes, work hours, and study time. Structure was the only thing that kept me from feeling overwhelmed. While I worked hard to stretch $20 into a week's worth of meals, my sister's life seemed like a storybook. My parents paid her rent for an apartment off campus and even furnished it, insisting she needed a comfortable space to focus. When she switched majors 3 times because she wanted to try new things, no one questioned it. She could drift through life without worrying about consequences. I knew she wasn't intentionally taking anything from me. The unfairness wasn't her fault. But it stung that she accepted every gift and opportunity as if it were normal, without even noticing how lucky she was. Meanwhile, every choice I made required careful calculation. Every mistake meant I had to sacrifice something else. During these years, I held multiple part-time jobs. I worked as a check-in clerk at a fitness center, as a cashier at a pharmacy, and later as a night shift receptionist at a logistics warehouse. The warehouse paid a little more, which was enough to keep me going even when exhaustion followed me like a shadow. Some nights I would stare at my computer screen, wondering how other people seemed to have time to rest and enjoy life. But this struggle taught me something very important. I learned how to survive without a safety net, how to face challenges without expecting anyone to catch me. Independence wasn't just a personality trait anymore. It became a form of survival. My parents rarely asked how I managed all of this. Their questions were polite but distant, like they were asking a neighbor rather than a daughter. Whenever conversations happened, they were always about Maricel, her social life, her classes, her plans. She was always in some transition, and each transition required a round of support from my parents. I listened quietly, nodded, and agreed because speaking up only got me labeled as difficult. I had learned early that arguing didn't help. It only made people see me as a problem. As time went on, the difference between our lives grew even bigger. I graduated with loans that I would have to pay back slowly. Maricel graduated with none. I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, but I still had to budget every penny carefully. I knew every dollar counted. Even now, when I think back on those years, I realize that all of this shaped me in ways nothing else could. I learned how to make my own path, how to rely on no one but myself, and how to face life's challenges with courage and determination. I learned that independence wasn't just a skill. It was a shield, a way to survive and to protect myself from disappointment. And yet all of this didn't stop the hurt. Every small kindness I gave to myself or achieved on my own felt like it existed in a world where the rest of my family was blind to it. Every victory, every accomplishment, every milestone was quietly mine, without celebration, without recognition. I learned to celebrate in silence, to give myself the applause I didn't get from anyone else. The truth is, growing up in a family like mine was like living in 2 worlds at the same time. One world was full of attention, help, and endless support for my sister. The other was quiet, hard, and invisible. I had to navigate both, and that taught me lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. And last Christmas, all of that history, all of that silent struggle finally reached a breaking point. I finally realized that no matter how much I gave, how much I worked, or how much I struggled, I would never be enough for them. They didn't just favor Maricel, they expected me to give her everything I had worked for. That realization hit harder than anything I had felt before, and it changed my life forever. She moved into a townhome that my parents helped her buy so she could start her life. They said it was a smart and practical choice, like a good investment. I didn't see it that way. I thought of it as just another part of a pattern that had been in our family for a long time, even before I was born. The same pattern repeated over and over. My parents always seemed to put her first, and it felt like my life was always being measured against hers. But strangely, I didn't feel angry or upset about the distance that was growing between us. I didn't resent it. In fact, I felt a little happy about it. It gave me space to think, space to breathe, and space to grow. Living on my own, building a life separate from my family, made me see things more clearly. Every time I faced a problem or obstacle, I learned how to be strong. Every small success felt special because I earned it myself. I had never felt that way as a child. Before, things were given, taken away, or judged unfairly. But now, every little win was mine, and it felt different. The further I moved from the pull of our family's way of doing things, the more I understood that being independent wasn't the same as being lonely. Independence wasn't about being by yourself. Independence meant freedom. It meant I could make choices for myself, and those choices would shape my life. Over the years, I started seeing things more clearly in the quiet parts of my daily routine. The clarity didn't come from one big moment or sudden inspiration. It came slowly, like little lights turning on over time. It happened during long nights at the warehouse where I worked. I would watch boxes, packages, and shipments move around in patterns that no one else noticed. I started to see mistakes, delays, misplaced items, and old systems that were hard to use. Workers had to fix problems with messy, temporary solutions, and I thought to myself, I can make this better. The idea didn't leave me. Even when I went home, I thought about how I could make things easier and smoother. The thought grew bigger every night until it became more than curiosity. It became a plan. I didn't have money to hire help. I didn't have connections in the tech world. I didn't even have my family on my side. But I did have one thing that was very powerful: discipline. I had learned to work hard and stay focused, and that discipline became the foundation for everything I built. After work, I started teaching myself coding. I used free online lessons and a borrowed textbook. It was very hard at first. I didn't understand many things. Some nights I wanted to give up because the coding felt impossible. But every small thing I learned pushed me forward. Each new concept was proof that I could make something real from my ideas. Slowly, I started building a very simple first version of a system that could help organize the warehouse better. To anyone else, it might have looked small and not impressive. But to me, it felt like opening a new door. I tested it over and over again. I fixed mistakes, rewrote parts of the system, and wrote down every bug I found. My apartment became part office, part storage room. Boxes and papers filled the space. My laptop stayed on long after the lights in the building went out. I worked at night when the world was quiet. During that time, I made a decision. I would not tell my family what I was doing. I had learned that my family always acted the same way. If they knew about my work, they would ignore it until it helped them. If it succeeded, they would act like it belonged to the whole family. If it failed, they would say, "See? You could never do anything as well as Maricel." Staying quiet felt safer. My life was my own. I wanted it to stay that way. My days were focused on progress. My family's days were focused on my sister. My parents kept praising her ideas and plans, even when she changed them every few months. She moved from one job to another slowly because she knew my parents would always support her. I watched as she got help for years, help that lasted longer than most people's patience. My mother would say she was finding herself. I learned that meant she was still waiting for someone else to solve her problems. Meanwhile, I kept working hard. I registered my company, NR Logistics Software, LLC. I started showing my system to small businesses. Some companies didn't want it. Some didn't understand what it could do. But a few listened. One small distribution center became my first client. When they agreed to use my system, I felt something inside me change. It wasn't pride. It was a special kind of feeling that came from earning something on my own. Something that no one had ever given me before. The work became very busy very fast. I balanced freelance jobs during the day with coding and system building at night. My bank account went up and down in ways that made me nervous. But every small win made the struggle feel worth it. Sometimes I wondered if all my hard work would ever matter. But giving up never crossed my mind. I had spent too much of my life proving I could handle things alone. Quitting would have meant letting my parents' story about me be true. I didn't want that. As my company grew, I started taking on responsibilities I had never imagined. I hired my first worker, then a second. I found a small office just big enough for 2 desks and a whiteboard full of deadlines. I learned things nobody had taught me: how to talk to clients, how to write invoices, how to meet investors. Each challenge made me stronger. Through it all, I stayed invisible to my family. They thought my life was quiet and ordinary. When I visited, the conversations were always about Maricel's new plans, her new expenses, or her new changes. The distance between us was no longer just emotional. It was part of how our lives were organized. They didn't ask about my work and I didn't tell them. It was easier that way. Being quiet protected me from expectations, from assumptions, from unnecessary questions. My growth didn't feel like a big celebration. It felt steady, earned, and private. For the first time, my life was built entirely on choices I made, not roles my family gave me. And even if no one else noticed, that difference mattered more than anything. As my business grew, my life got busier in ways I hardly recognized. The quiet routines I used to like turned into a non-stop cycle of meetings, updates, and important decisions. My company was no longer just a side project. It had grown into a functioning machine full of responsibility and potential. Each step forward demanded more focus and more precision. I adapted because adapting had always been my default. I had no choice but to grow with it. Eventually, investors started reaching out with serious interest. I met them carefully, making sure their goals matched the integrity of my product. Success didn't feel like pride yet, but it felt real. Every night of work showed results. The talks about buying my company began quietly. A medium-sized tech company asked for a demo, then asked for financial numbers, then held long follow-up meetings. Every paper I handed over represented years of discipline and hard work. I kept my feelings controlled, not because I didn't care, but because it still didn't feel real enough to celebrate. Finally, the offer came. I read the email several times, thinking I might be dreaming. They wanted to buy my company for $25 million and complete the deal within a few months. The contract wasn't a surprise after all the meetings, but the number still felt unreal. I signed the papers alone in my office. Empty coffee cups and scribbled notes surrounded me, reminders of nights when I wasn't sure anything would work. There was no announcement, no cheering, no celebration. I saved a copy of the signed contract, closed my laptop, and sat quietly, feeling the weight of what had just happened. I never expected applause, but the lack of it hurt more than I wanted to admit. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my sister, not even relatives who always treated news like treasure. The success was mine. For the first time, I wanted something in my life to stay untouched by family problems. During the same time, my parents kept helping Maricel. They refinanced part of their home to help her through a transitional period. They paid bills she forgot and praised her for being stable, even when her idea of stability was moving from one short-lived job to another. Their support never stopped, and she accepted it without question. I didn't feel angry or jealous. I had learned long ago that their choices had nothing to do with who deserved what. They always saw Maricel as perfect, and they saw me through a lens of expectations, not promise. Nothing I did could change that, and I stopped wishing it would. As December came, my Aunt Isolde Thane asked if I would attend the holiday dinner. She sounded really curious but not nosy. I said yes. In the quiet pause after I answered, I could feel a little tension in the air. Maybe she was worried. Maybe she was hoping for something. She didn't know about the company sale, but she knew I had been working on something big. For some reason, I didn't worry about her reaction. On the night of the dinner, I drove to my parents' house with no plan to tell anyone anything. My goal was simple: show up, be polite, avoid conflict, and leave early if things got uncomfortable. I didn't expect anything unusual. I didn't expect questions I couldn't answer. I definitely didn't expect the night to go in a way that would change everything between me and my family. Walking into the house felt familiar yet strange. I could feel how much I had changed since the last time we were together. The decorations were perfect, just like my mother liked, and the usual noise of holiday chatter filled the house. Nothing in the room showed that the night was about to change. I moved carefully through the rooms, saying hello politely, smiling, and not staying too long anywhere. Most conversations were small talk, and I liked it that way. Being quiet had become natural, especially when everyone focused on old roles I no longer fit into. Dinner started in the usual way. Plates were passed, questions were asked about ordinary things, and Maricel received plenty of praise for her new plans. I listened quietly, knowing how to handle the family dynamic by now. The night could have stayed normal except for one person who always noticed more than the rest. Aunt Isolde Thane waited until everyone had settled at the table. Then she looked at me and asked very calmly how my work had been going. She didn't raise her voice or make a scene. She just asked in a way that showed she already knew more than she was asking. In that short moment of silence, I felt the whole room change. Something about the way she asked made me feel seen in a way nobody else did. People looked at me not because they were curious, but because they were surprised that I had said something that needed a real answer. I felt heavy inside, like a weight was pressing on my chest. For the first time that night, there was no quiet way to get away. Keeping the truth inside felt harder than saying it out loud. I didn't give extra details. I only said the main thing. I had sold my company. I said the number of money it was sold for quietly and clearly. I didn't say it to show off. I said it because I wanted to be honest about all the hard work I had done. After I said it, the room went so quiet it felt strange. Everyone's faces changed, not slowly but suddenly. It was like they needed a moment to understand what they had just heard. First they looked shocked. Then they didn't believe it. Then something sharper came, something that made the air feel tense and heavy. I didn't need anyone to speak for me to feel it. My mother's body became stiff and cold. I knew that look. I had seen it before. It was the same look she had when she expected me to do something and I didn't. My father froze. He was so still it felt like he had stopped moving inside. But the most shocking reaction came from my sister. She didn't look confused or curious. She looked panicked, like the world she always counted on was tipping over. Her panic grew quickly. The quiet shock turned into clear worry. Her breathing was uneven as she tried to understand the number I had said. I could feel her energy collapse, like the steady ground she always stood on was disappearing. The sense that she had always felt she deserved special treatment didn't go away. It grew. She realized I had built something huge without her knowing, and it didn't fit the story she always believed about herself. The mood in the room shifted more when judgment replaced silence. Faces hardened. Eyes narrowed. Questions formed, but no one needed to speak for me to understand. They weren't impressed. They weren't proud. They were shocked that something important had happened without their permission or help. What scared them wasn't the money. It was that I had done it on my own. They couldn't control my future, and that scared them more than anything else. My sister's panic grew as she understood what this meant, and the tension at the table made it clear that everything we thought about our family had changed. Their reactions were not about the number. They were about what the number meant in a family that never expected me to matter. Nothing happened suddenly. It happened slowly, like a crack in glass that spreads before it breaks. Life went back to looking normal outside. But inside I felt something shifting. Something was quietly pulling at the edges of what was left between me and my family. The first warning came as a message from my bank. I usually ignored these, but this one had numbers that didn't match any plan I had. Someone had tried to move a lot of money from my accounts to a place I didn't know. Nothing went through, but it felt like someone was breathing behind me. When I called the bank to check, the details they could give me matched information only a few people knew. They had answered security questions I never shared and used contact info connected to my family. The bank didn't say it, but I knew what it meant. Someone close to me tried to use what they knew to get money. The feeling didn't come as anger. It came as a slow sinking feeling, like realizing the floor of a house you trusted has holes. I always knew my family felt they could have my time, my attention, and my help. Seeing that they thought they could have my money too changed something inside me. I knew I had to protect myself. I called Zephra, a lawyer I had been told about months ago but never really talked to. I told her everything. The bank warnings, the way my family had given my sister favors, and the pressure that got worse as my success grew. She listened calmly and then told me how to protect what I had built. Through Zephra, I asked Kale to help with the finances. He showed exactly how much support my sister had gotten over the years and how my parents had helped her when she made mistakes. My own path had been separate, and the numbers made it clear. It was not imagination or me being sensitive. It was proof. Arden handled the technical side, collecting logs and records from the bank legally. He tracked devices and locations that matched my parents' routines. Everything he found was clear. It was timelines, access points, and patterns. The more we learned, the harder it was to pretend it was just confusion. With all this, Zephyr moved from family tension to official action. Letters went out. Restrictions were put in place for who could contact my bank. Claims were filed so my parents and sister had to respond in writing instead of behind my back. Their messages changed from trying to guilt me to defending themselves. Once they saw that there were real consequences, it affected them more than they thought. Their accounts were checked. Their attempts to move money caused questions they couldn't answer. Their credit got tighter. People they wanted to impress started hearing a different story, not the one about a selfish daughter hiding her money. Reputation, which they used as a shield, became something fragile. My sister felt it most. Without easy access to new money, she could no longer treat bills like suggestions. House payments became heavy. The car that seemed like a status symbol became a burden. Selling things she once took for granted wasn't revenge. It was just life without someone else quietly helping her. I also made quiet changes. I moved to a new place with no shared history and no expectations. I spent time with people who cared about me, not just what I could give. I focused on work that mattered to me, mentoring others and supporting projects that matched my values. Cutting contact wasn't a single moment. It was a series of choices. Ignoring calls, leaving messages unanswered, blocking old channels. It was sad, but it was the kind of sadness that comes from finally telling the truth. I wasn't walking away from love. I was stepping out of a family that made me shrink so someone else could feel bigger. Looking back, the money was the smallest part. The real change was seeing how quickly people who said they loved me could cross every line if they thought they were owed something. Trying to take my accounts wasn't just greed. It was controlled. When they lost control, they chose breaking rules over respect. The most important thing to remember is this: just because someone is family doesn't mean they have a right to your life or your future. Love and support are earned through respect, not guilt. Boundaries are not betrayal. They protect what you worked hard to build when no one else believed you could. I didn't cut ties because I stopped caring. I cut ties because caring had become a tool they could use to take what was mine, and I would not let them. Now my life is quieter, but it is real. I can breathe without fear of someone taking what I earned. I can make plans that are only mine and that feel safe. I spend time with people who respect me, who don't measure love in money or favors, but in kindness, honesty, and support. I think back to that night at the table when I said the number. Feels like a moment of truth. It wasn't about money. It was about showing that I could build my own life. That moment changed everything. It wasn't easy and it wasn't simple. But it taught me something important. The people who truly care will celebrate your success without trying to control it. The people who don't care will try to take it. And you have to be brave enough to protect what is yours. Every day I remind myself of that lesson. I remind myself that I built something that no one could take unless I let them. And I will not let them. Because what I built is not just money, it is my life, my effort, and my future. And no one, not even family, has the right to take that from me.